Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our fifth dissemination event. I want to thank ETH for hosting us here today, and it's a pleasure to welcome everyone who joined us here. So I will just say that kindly ask to everyone to turn off their phone or put them on a silent mode, and there will also be a space for Q&As at the end of each speech. So I will just start saying that the current period that we're living in is facing a lot of challenges, and those challenges deal with climate crisis, geopolitical shift, and also technological disruption. And we are realizing how important the theme and the topic of digital sovereignty has become during today's day. So as you can see from the screen, the title of the fifth dissemination event is Digital Sovereignty in Evolving Times, Harmonizing Privacy, Sustainability for a Resilient and Self-Reliant Europe. So what we're going to be discussing today is actually about how Europe is going to balance out all of those components. So how is Europe going to balance out technological innovation, ensuring privacy, but at the same time guaranteeing reducing the environmental impact. So I will just give a brief overview of the agenda. We will start with an introduction on the Glaciation project and on the Glaciation general theme. This will be done by Mr. Aidan O'Mahony. He is the technical coordinator of our Glaciation project, and he's also a senior principal research scientist at Dell. We will continue with the keynote speeches, which will be moderated by Mr. Alex Borg. He's a project manager at the Lisbon Council. And then we will continue with a panel discussion moderated by Babis Hajamadis. He's a project manager at the Lisbon Council as well. So I will leave the floor to you, Aidan, to give us an overview of the Glaciation project.
So thanks, Alicia. So my name is Aidan O'Mahony. I'm a researcher in Dell. I'm also fortunate to serve as the technical and scientific coordinator for the Glaciation project. So I'd like to start by thanking Magi and the team here at ETH for hosting us and hosting this event, and my good friends at the Lisbon Council for arranging the event, and the keynote speakers and the panelists for attending and helping us discuss this difficult topic. And also then the audience who are hopefully engaging with this interesting discussion. So I think this is our fifth dissemination event. We started originally the Harmonising series, you could call it, because when we looked at the challenge of balancing energy and privacy, we found sometimes these are competing challenges. And we were interested then in how we can harmonize the two together, that they can coexist and we can achieve our goals of energy and green data operations, as well as ensuring the privacy of data and of personal data within our platform is maintained. So this is an interesting topic because it's certainly become more relevant recently. And Glaciation, the solution, is well positioned to address this harmonizing privacy and sustainability in a self-reliant Europe. This challenge is actually something that Glaciation is well suited for. There are technologies within the project that we're researching, such as novel privacy techniques, policy, allowing policy to be created for data, for data operations, types of, I suppose, novel privacy enforcement. And through the use of open standards, we can also support a resilient and self-reliant Europe through use of open standards. So that's the Glaciation project. And as I mentioned, I believe we're well positioned to support the topic of today's event, that being the harmonization of privacy and sustainability in a resilient and self-reliant Europe. And I look forward to the interesting keynote speeches and the panel as well. And I hope everyone enjoys it. And I'll hand back to Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aidan and Alessia, for that really lovely and on-point introduction. I'm very lucky today to moderate or MC the keynote speech portion, and we have a really great lineup for you today. I wanted to start with a few words as well on digital sovereignty. So it's obviously a real pleasure to welcome you all here. We're here to explore a concept that has shaped international relations since 1648, or probably even longer, and that's sovereignty. But as many of our most established ideas, sovereignty has evolved in and of itself. So today it's no longer confined to just territorial borders or statehood. It's taken a powerful new dimension, digital sovereignty, and often strategic autonomy as well lies within that. Across Europe, this conversation is deeply interwoven with technological sovereignty, strategic autonomy, and resilience. Together, they reflect the European Union's ambition to maintain control of its digital destiny while remaining true to its core values: democracy, transparency, and human rights. At its core, digital sovereignty is about the ability of states or unions like the EU to govern, regulate, and safeguard their digital ecosystem. That includes data, infrastructure, standards, and increasingly the algorithms that shape our everyday lives. And we'll find out a lot more soon to come. But let's be honest, that's no easy talk. We're living through a period of immense geopolitical shifts, rapid technological disruption, and mounting pressures of the climate crisis. This afternoon, our discussion will revolve around a few key questions. In what world defined by global instability and disruption, how can the EU maintain its sovereignty while staying true to its ethical commitments? And perhaps more importantly, what tools, what mechanisms, and what innovations does Europe have at its disposal to govern its digital ecosystem effectively? To explore these questions, we are joined by a high-caliber panel of keynote speakers, as well as panelists who bring deep insight and bold ideas to this table. I've given them quite a prescription. Yeah. So today, to help us unpack these challenges and opportunities around digital sovereignty, we will hear the following keynote speeches from the following speakers. So, the power of resilience, thriving in an uncertain world, delivered by Pierre Rossel, President of Inspiring Futures, Europe's Digital Future, Governance, AI, and Sustainability for a Sovereign and Resilient Europe, with Francesco Mureddu, Trust in Digital Europe, Strengthening Cybersecurity while Upholding Privacy Rights with Chiara, The Future of AI and High-Performance Computing, from Graph Intelligence to Ethical Digital Sovereignty with Maicha, and from Material Science to Digital Sovereignty, Bridging AI, Measurement, and Innovation for a Resilient Europe with Gwen, and Sovereign Mobility, How Data and AI Can Drive Sustainable and Autonomous Transport. So with that, I'm excited to give the floor to Pierre, our first keynote speaker. Pierre holds a PhD in anthropology and spent over 2 decades teaching technology assessment and foresight at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. A seasoned futurist, he has contributed to major publications and worked with leading international associations. In 2022, he co-founded Inspiring Futures, an advisory company focused on immersive technologies and their applications in areas like healthcare and climate resilience, bridging academic insight with practical innovation. So, Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. It's a pleasure. So we'll see if I can get to my.
We can.
Otherwise, it'd be a pleasure to be a cappella, you know.
Can they see it?
Okay, so I was invited to speak of the resilience perspective, which is a very nice word and quite compelling to be, innovating and creating our own future. So for someone who has founded Inspire Future, that was really the right topic. However, it's also a very vague or sometimes overused word to say lots of things. And so I will try to deconstruct and reconstruct a little bit what it may mean regarding digital sovereignty. So the first point is that digital sovereignty is not a new topic. Obviously, it's been there for a while, but it took some time for a lot of people to consider that it was a topic, an issue. And meanwhile, during all this time it took, of course, it worsened. There's all the ingredients, all the factors increased and reached a situation where today we are really in an acute situation. And of course, we are here to talk about the digital sphere, digital means, digital resources, and so on. But we have to consider that given the particular role of the digital in our society, there's a lot of systemic interlinkages and in all domains. I mean, there is literally nothing untouched by a sort of digital sovereignty challenge. So there's a lot of problems, and I sort of distinguished layers. First, the four layers linked to the fact that it has some economic consequences. We have to face giants who don't necessarily obey the same laws and the same criteria and compelled to the same values and moral and ethical constraints. We have clearly a security challenge, and I would say right now, I mean, when I say right now, I mean these weeks, this reached a new level of intensity, obviously, and with a lot of uncertainty on how we are going to be able to take up that challenge. So it's more than that. It's also a cultural problem. I didn't put that in my slides, but I would like to remind you that when the wall fell, and I think it was 1889, something like that, there was this idea that we would have solved everything, major problems at least, and that there was this idea that was the end of history, and that from there on we would have only a world of producers and consumers, and happy producers and happy consumers, thanks to all the international multilateral organizations settling disputes and all this. So that was the idea. And of course, in that context, the idea of digital sovereignty made no sense at all. I mean, on the contrary, it was like a bad word. And so today we have to wake up, because during all this time since that concept emerged of the end of history, things worsened. And of course, it also touches today the environmental domain, since there's a lot of negationist and averse narratives at work, where all the policies that we're trying to establish in Europe with the Green Deal are somehow hurt. And so this is the reality. And thanks to some wise people, the European Union has already taken up a lot of challenges and difficulties and hurdles and threats and risks, etc., with measures. And here's just a very brief inventory. In fact, it's much more important than that. But of course, there's something linked to the data environment and the data flow and the data production and the data protection and so on. Starting with the Berlin Declaration. Well, I don't know if it really started with, but it was a major point to somehow decisively be, let's say, assertive on how much we must do something about data. And regarding AI also, there's the AI Act, etc. There's the idea of protecting privacy rights, of course, the GDPR, And then fair business. It's also concerned with the DMA, DSA, and IPR fairness in a world which is not so fair, obviously. And there is a general tendency to do all this with some concern to converge, not totally, but in a great extent with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. So most of these directives have been defensive, but there are some offensive or proactive, positive proactive aspects in most of them, if we look at them very carefully. So we're not without having done anything, on the contrary, but there is still a lot to do. And this is the other facet, a lot to do. First, there is a series of open and unsolved challenges, in particular cybersecurity, and of course the digital trust we can have today in the current state of the internet, and all the disinformation, not speaking about spying, which is of course has been there and prevailing all the time, but disinformation has reached an industrial level, a massive level that it didn't have before. So it's always existed a little bit. And cybersecurity is not solved at all. I mean, it's a huge international governance challenge and far from being settled. But there are a number of other elements in that landscape. Of course, military systems are also producing a certain level of long-term dependencies. When you buy anything in the military, it's not for a few years, it's for some decades of dependence, and especially software dependence in particular. And the time it takes to imagine substitutes for most of the existing, let's say, digital services that have been successful so far. Let's imagine the search engine. Try to get rid of Google every day for about 6 months, and you will see where you are. Main operating systems, main social media platforms. You know that if you take the 10 most important social media platforms, you are either US or Chinese. So that's very important to consider. The NVIDIA chips, or the chips in general, but the NVIDIA chip is, of course, a challenge because it is very important for AI. And you know that we are here in Switzerland. Well, the Swiss government didn't have a privilege to be able to acquire the NVIDIA chips. They are second in the row. Maybe later they will be able to get these chips because the company decided that, of course, there were privileged countries first to be served, and Switzerland is not among the first to be served. It's not an important issue, but just to say to what extent of detail it goes, and that's super important. And of course, there is the satellite thing, especially in terms of defense. So can we get rid of Starlink if we don't want to be dependent? Well, IRIS is promised for 2030. Until then, just forget it. We are in trouble. But if we want to see all the problems, it's more than that. It's about chips, it's about digital platforms, it's about mobiles, the dependence, rare earths, digital champions to be able to compete. And so I think the glaciation project, as I understood, because I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with it, but wanted to really start to assert the idea that we need a cloud and edge continuum. And this is a super good idea, of course. I noticed that some countries and member states in particular don't necessarily, well, it's not so easy to comply with this idea and try to be sort of compromising on independence and dependence, because it's not easy to jump. It's like a base jump right away into sovereignty. And also we must conceive that this problem is not just for storage or securing data, but also for all the data workflows end-to-end, and all the associated infrastructures that are really manipulating, producing, and using this data in all the domains. And so that's a huge area of concern that is, of course, not only linked to the moment we store and secure these things. And just a little thing about the satellite issue, we must acknowledge that in this case we are pretty good. I mean, we are with Gaia X and Copernicus, Galileo. I think there's been an important awareness towards some sovereignty indeed. And even if Iris is still ahead and will need some space defense capacity because satellites can be attacked, of course, we are pretty good. So it's not so bad. Actually, there is one point I didn't mention here that is super important, is the deficit in investment in AI. And it's in fact a multifold aspect, since some countries don't necessarily hurry up to comply with the European views and values on this, to say the least. And so we are in a sort of battlefield with very uneven investment and a lot of very tricky connections where AI is not just a technology per se, but is embedded in lots of things where it's hidden somehow and active. So we have to be aware of the full-fledged landscape. So what can we do? This is the idea of resilience, right? In spite of all these problems, we must do something, not wait for things to be solved by itself. So we need to learn how to do several things at the same time. That's what I call ambidexterity. My right hand and my left hand must cooperate, and I don't have to choose. I must do one and the other. And urgencies, like there are things that are immediately urgent, and strategic vision with anticipatory action also is needed, and they must converge, which is not so easy, by the way. We need political cohesion, which is not easy, obviously, and maybe also we need new alliances in a very changing world, and maybe be curious alliances with people who are themselves hurt by unfair treatments. And we need also be able to engage into complementary and synergic investment instead of rebuilding nationally everything at fractally in a competing perspective. I want my French this and my German that and my Dutch thing. No, we must find a way to construct let's say an optimized situation with complementary capacities, which is also part of the problem, but part of the solution. That's the good point. And so building on these areas of excellence we have a chance to be quick, but we need to also identify our strengths. And our strengths are here in yellow. Of course, science is still super good, and we need to build on this. Industry is still super good. And science-industry partnerships also are very effective, inclusively at European level, pan-European level, not just national level. When we say open, well, it's a lot of different things. We mean open source, open innovation, etc. That means that we also have to build new business models, new IPR perspectives, that are to be constructed not just as a protective, but also as a partnering dimension. That means sectoral perspectives. That means community-driven levels also for regional capacities, and sustainability considerations should be assessed within that framework. And then the last point of this aspect is the skills. We have skills. And we need, of course, they can be bought by American or Chinese or Japanese or whoever, but we also can, sort of constantly build new skills that are needed for this particular emerging situation, including the risk we have to cope with. And that's what I call the meta skill. That is, how do we learn how to learn on this in this situation? And we have to work on gaps, of course, but this is a continuous thing, and probably the cloud and edge is one of the gaps that we are trying to to fill, but there are others. We are with John Francesco also engaged in another project with XR and virtual worlds. It's the same thing. We need to go for more professional applications that where all these qualities, European qualities, can do wonder, and look for maybe an AI of a different kind. So this is interesting. We have to reinvent the large language model into different varieties we can use and quickly implement and prototype for our own professional and industrial needs, which is the key problem. And that would allow, be curiously, maybe with the development of generative AI of that kind, to bypass to some extent the search engine deficit, which is incommensurable otherwise. So in order to do this, some of our friends tried to engage into a new sort of militancy, saying we should develop a new skill which we call science and tech diplomacy, because we need to agree and be cohesive among ourselves, but we need also to discuss with others elsewhere, with non-European players. That's the idea. I'm almost finished. So that's the last point. Resilience, for me, is the capability to do all this simultaneously. If we do only one thing, it's not resilience, because it will be always awkward and vacillating, because all these things are really interlinked, and therefore the capability to work on all these levels, directions, and stakes simultaneously and learn together and quickly is what I call the resilience. That's my own definition. And it should not be restricted to this whole digital focus. We have the same problem in the food dimension, in the medicine acquisition, in the energy systems. So we have different types of dependencies we must solve. And so probably this is what I call, it's a cross-cutting mantra. It's a new way and to get out of this idea that we're at the end of history, where everybody will be just producing and consuming in a flawless economic landscape. No, not at all. It's a conflictive and multi-conflictive perspective we have to cope with. And so the sovereignty issue and the resilience to the sovereignty issue is to be understood as part of that real and pragmatic confrontation. So we absolutely need to install the narrative on resilience, not on a nice word to be transparent, inclusive, and all this, which is good and normal, and we have to do that, but also we have to be more performative. That is, we have to be able to establish immediate capacity to translate these claims that we have into concrete projects, concrete actions, concrete effects, and measurable evolution. Otherwise, it's just sort of incantation that they may sort of stay forever. So this is like a common software we must construct together. This is my idea. Okay, so I've finished my little intervention. And if you want to discuss, I'm available. If not, further in my own email. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure, does anybody have any question? Now's your chance. We'll have some questions at the end. So if you have any questions at the end, please do come. Now we'll be heading to the next speaker, Dr. Francesco Mureddu, the Vice President of the Lisbon Council. Francesco is a titan in the field of digital innovation with over 20 years of experience shaping forward-looking strategies for governments, institutions, and public sector transformation. He works consistently at the intersection of technology, policy, and impact, showing us how digital tools, when guided by the right values, can drive genuine public value. He's also my boss, so please be nice. Yeah, so that's why he's a titan. But anyhow, I give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I will basically cut the chase a little bit, as everybody has spoken about what are the challenges that we are facing at the moment. Does it work? Yes. I want to stress a couple of points. First of all, something that is interesting in Europe is that there is a lot of governance and government and a lot of regulations. And this kind of regulation from one side can be seen basically a hindrance, but they are important because they can ensure that technologies are used in a way that is fair, transparent, and human-centric. If we consider, for instance, what happened in the US, when basically civil servants received an email and they had to respond in a few days, basically stating what's their job, what they did the week before. And we can argue that basically the emails, the answers were basically treated and examined by AI. So the AI basically decided who was fired and who was not. We are very lucky that in Europe we still don't have this kind of problems. So it's very important, to have basically the governance that we still have. Another point that is important is the twin transition. At least it was important to up to this point. Hopefully, it's going to be important also in the future. So basically, the digital tools are seen as important to achieve the climate goals for Europe, and of course, the glaciation comes very interestingly combining AI, edge, and for sustainability. So the idea is that the digital sector itself must become more sustainable. But there are two set of technologies that are very important in glaciation and that should be pushed forward. So one is, of course, AI, that is a force for a resilient economy, especially trustworthy AI, but in general AI that can enhance productivity, innovation, and public services. And the second one is the edge to cloud paradigm. That is very important, and of course, in the project like glaciation, but also a lot of projects where other partners from glaciation are deeply engaged, like Edge, like ACES, like Next Generation, like CAPE, in which basically Edge is seen as Edge to cloud is seen as a possible answer to ensure technology sovereignty, as data, basically data are processed locally, and also it's important for improving energy efficiency and resource optimization. In that regard, the Lisbon Council is very much engaged in projects that boost sustainability, that boost the edge to cloud paradigm, that boost big data and AI. Here are several projects in which we are involved, and especially some projects that we lead directly, like Your Breath and Blossom, which employ digital twin and AI in order to improve, basically to boost urban regeneration and improve the resilience of cities to climate change. Or another project in which we are involved with Pierre, it's Openverse, Open and Co-Created Virtual Worlds for Europe, where we study, basically we do technology foresight and foresight on IPR that will, IPR models that will allow virtual worlds to be open and co-created and to basically to be at the service of the European population. So what we want to do is basically boost data and infrastructure sovereignty, and this is important if we consider, the Data Governance Act, the AI Act. So this is basically what the European Commission is boosting. But there are also several ideas from the European Commission that are very important to boost it also in a very concrete way. So one is the Invest AI initiative, which I call the nuclear option. So the fact that the European Commission has the idea to mobilize 200 billion in order to boost AI investments and to build basically AI gigafactories. Of course, the idea has to be declined, has to be improved, and has to be put in practice. But has the US during World War II invested a lot of money to create nuclear weapons that were used to finish the conflict, to solve the conflict? in our case, we really need to go beyond the Horizon Europe and Digital Europe program in order to put a lot of money into AI and into the construction of new gigafactories and new models. Of course, Digital Europe program, which was launched the last version on March 28, is also very important. 1.3 billion will be spent from 2025 to 2027. A lot on AI, of course, cybersecurity and digital skills. So these are also, basically important steps. And from 2028 on, FP10, that will be part of basically of the competitiveness fund, will be focused a lot on exploitation of digital technologies. So we are going towards an improvement in competitiveness that is basically boosted through funding. But apart from investment in AI, there is also an idea that was basically discussed during IPEC with Fred Bruning from Cairo when I presented GLACIATION, and he presented CAPE and ACES. So the idea to have an open source European edge cloud stack that basically is understood as a software framework that comprises open source technologies and that wants to basically boost cloud computing capabilities at the network edge. So of course I'm not technical. The audience is much more technical than I am. But the idea is of course to build an edge computing infrastructure that will improve energy efficiency. And of course, the idea is to boost the technology sovereignty because it would reduce dependence on non-European cloud providers and improve security and transparency because it will be open source. So it would allow transparency inspection of and auditing of code and improve sustainability and efficiency as GLACIATION and other projects are demonstrating. In any case, if you have any questions or if you want to engage with me, you know where to find me. Thanks a lot.
An opportunity if anybody had any questions at this stage. We'll have another round right at the end, as well as the keynote speeches. 3 seconds. I don't see any hands raised. Thank you. Next on our list, we have Maria Chiara, who's somebody I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend. And she's a project manager and research associate at the Lisbon Council, where she leads our work in the project along with Federico Imanuru. Maria brings strong governance of emerging technologies with a strong focus on privacy, surveillance, and fundamental rights. Maria, are you here? Can you hear us? Because I know you're joining us online.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
We can hear you. We can see you now. We will.
I'm sharing my presentation. I don't know if
yes.
you see.
I'm trying to figure. Okay, here's the mouse. Out. And I have to move this. Wait. Okay. Here we go. Yeah.
So can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. We can see your presentation. The floor is yours. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm going to present the CoCyber project. So CoCyber is a 2-year European project that aims at strengthening collaboration and coordination between the civilian and defense cybersecurity sectors. And the project seeks to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, best practices, and information between these two critical areas. It started on the 1st July 2024, and it will end on the 30 June 2026. And it's formed by a consortium of 5 partners. So the key mission of the project is basically to create a strong and inclusive cybersecurity ecosystem. And the idea is that by strengthening both civilian and defense sectors, the project can contribute to Europe's cybersecurity resilience and strategic autonomy in the digital age. And the project revolves around 6 key objectives. So there is the one of establishing a solid framework for mutual expertise sharing between sectors, the one of creating a secure digital platform and a cybersecurity observatory for effective stakeholder collaboration. Then we also aim at organizing events, workshops, and seminars on cybersecurity, technological innovation, and dual-use technologies, as well as governance, but also to develop coordinated policy recommendation across EU member states, also leveraging consortium leadership and aligning with existing European cybersecurity initiatives, and also building a community of cybersecurity ambassadors and also establishing a strong advisory board. So who benefits from this project? Well, the project aims at benefiting a wide range of stakeholders that spans from national, regional, and local authorities, private sectors, but also academia, research institutions, as well as European projects and initiatives. There are several expected outcomes, including the one of enhancing cybersecurity resilience, as I said previously, by strengthening defense and against cyber threats. The one of promoting innovation and competitiveness by exchanging the best practices and but also cutting edge technologies between the 2 sectors. Building policy recommendation and also engaging the community by creating a network of stakeholders that actively participates in the project initiatives. Why does the project matter? So the idea, the origin of the project is that we're currently living in a digital era that has introduced a new domain of threats where both civilian and defense infrastructure face more and more complex cyber risks and cyber attacks. So currently, the traditional boundaries, such as those between public utilities and the military supply chain, are becoming more and more blurred. So in other words, the attackers, they do not differentiate anymore between civilian and defense infrastructures. And therefore, a single cyber attack can impact both civilian infrastructures, such as like hospitals and power grid, as well as defense systems, such as like military networks. So, and the other idea is that both sectors bring distinct yet complementary strength, because on one hand, we have the defense sector that excels in strategic threat intelligence and strong security protocols. And on the other hand, we have the civilian sector that drives cutting-edge innovation and technological development. And the idea is that when these strengths are combined, they form a powerful synergy. And this synergy enables a more adaptive and proactive and also resilient approach to cybersecurity. And when it comes to protecting privacy, the CoCyber project, through its primary mission of building a stronger and more coordinated cybersecurity landscape, it creates the necessary and ideal conditions for protecting privacy in the broader European digital ecosystem. And when we think about the intensification of cyber threats compromising infrastructures and disrupting services with increasingly sophisticated techniques, therefore, that leads to growing risks for privacy affecting millions of people. We realize that strengthening cybersecurity and protecting citizens' privacy rights becomes a literal human priority, not just a technical one anymore. And yeah, the idea is that we live in a world where individuals rely on their personal data to access the most essential services, such as like healthcare, education, financial systems, but also to fully participate in society. So basically, this personal data becomes much more than just information. It really reflects identity, autonomy, and trust. And when it's compromised, it's not only a violation of personal data, it's a literal threat to individual dignity, but also democratic values. So the idea is that by promoting coordinated and resilient cybersecurity ecosystem, CoCyber will help ensure that the digital environment in which sensitive personal data that circulates becomes more secure, better defended, and more transparent. And yeah, in addition, the convergence between the civilian and defense efforts also means bridging technical differences, but also with ethical responsibility. And the defense sector's strength in strategic response and like combined to the civilian sector's emphasis on more like human-centric innovation can create a space for better privacy by design approaches to flourish, and especially when guided by European values and fundamental rights and democratic accountability, so all those values on which the European Union is founded on. And basically, in this way, the CoCyber project and the main mission of CoCyber is therefore not just to better ameliorate the response to cyber threats, but also indirectly to contribute to the protection of what is the most personal and human in the current digital age, which is our right to privacy. So, yeah, that's it for CoCyber. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. If you think of any towards the end, we'll have another few moments just to ask any questions to the keynote speakers. Next on our list, we have our host, Dr. Maiche. And in fact, I had written some words, but I have corrected them here on my phone. So just to give a quick introduction here, Maiche is a senior scientist who leads research on board graph computations and large language models at Scalable Parallel Computing Lab at ETH Zurich, where we are today. He also works on other aspects of high-performance computing landscape, including interconnects, general sparse computing, and others. Maiche published more than 50 top conference and journal papers. He also won, among others, the competition for the best student of Poland, the first Google Fellowship in Parallel Computing, the ACMI EEE-CS High Performance Computing Fellowship, the IEE TCSH Award for Excellence in Scalable Computing Early Career, and the Olympus Mons Award for contributions to scalable storage systems, and a few more as well. But with that, I will give. I think that's quite a lot. I think that's quite a list. Yeah?
Let's get to something more interesting.
Let's get to something a little bit more interesting. I pass the microphone to Maiche. Go ahead.
Thanks for a very nice introduction. So I'll be speaking about a very, very interesting and most timely topic of namely how can we ensure digital sovereignty or arrive at digital sovereignty, and specifically ethical digital sovereignty from the perspective of graph intelligence. Very briefly about myself, I'm broadly interested in sparse irregular graph computing, which deals with efficient processing of objects such as sparse matrices or graph structures, and this really overlaps with a very, very high amount of different types of workloads. So it borders or highly overlaps with things like LLM ecosystems, agent infrastructures, broad generative AI training and inference, and a couple of others such as databases, graph neural networks, or dynamic streaming temporal graphs. The other core interest is how to run these workloads efficiently and effectively on the underlying parallel resources. We span, for example, massively parallel chips or large-scale data centers, such that they can run fast, effectively, scalably, and we can manage them and run them simply. So I'm going to focus on a very important part of the compute landscape today. So we all know ChatGPT and the ongoing AI revolution. We all know that they have very high capabilities and are getting more and more powerful. And really the question is, how can we manage these workloads more effectively? How can we make them more efficient? And most importantly, how can we make them work for our digital sovereignty and not, for example, the vice versa? So let's start from the technical perspective of what do we actually do when we mean the LLM processing pipeline or general LLM AI. So we have raw data that we are using in a process called pre-training to get the first very rough version of the pre-trained large language model. Then we apply a couple of different usually additional training stages that can involve, for example, supervised fine-tuning, where we have a more fine version of our model. We apply other stages such as instruction tuning, more recently reinforcement learning. And finally, we get to the version which is our final model, such as our GPT-4o, that we can then interact with by sending our prompts and receiving the replies that we are going to refer to as the LLM thoughts. So now the important thing is that this whole pipeline has been evolving very substantially in the last year to emerge to basically provide us with something that we can call the generative AI ecosystem. So it's not just the training pipeline on the prompting, but really many other elements that can fall within either the training related pieces or in the inference related pieces. This, for example, includes using tools by LLMs. So LLMs are now very intelligent. They can use tools such as Python scripts. They can actually code their own tools, execute their own tools. So they are getting more and more versatile. Other elements are, for example, the psychology of agents or using multi-agent collaboration settings. So we can actually run a large number of such models together, and we observe some emerging behavior in their communication, how they interact, and can actually solve these problems better in a collective fashion. They can also access the web these days to have more up-to-date information. They can use databases with additional storage. So they are getting actually even more and more up-to-date with what's going on. And also one other the central topic for today is the prompting structure. So the way that they are now going to be used or the way they reason is also becoming more and more structured, not just generating a sequence of tokens, but really imposing logical abstract concepts on how they actually can think. So let's start with these prompting structures. So prompting, these days we also refer to these paradigms as the reasoning paradigms. So this all started with the very basic way we interact with models, right? So the very basic way we interact with models is just sending the input prompt, as we can see here, with the one vertex, and getting the output, which is the output vertex here. So this is a very simple way of interacting with these models and how they can reason. And we can see an example here is like we just provide our model input, and this usually includes so-called in-context example, where we show the model a ready example of what we wanted to do for us. With here we can see a question which is some very simple logical puzzle about tennis balls, and we provide the example answer, and then we ask the actual question we care about, and we hope the model to answer it in a correct way. But here we can see that the answer is 27, and it's actually not really correct if you really calculate it. So that is where the reasoning, the very simple graph prompting paradigms kick in, because a very early work showed that if we actually structure this reasoning in a more thorough way, namely if we actually provide explicit sequence of steps in our in-context example here. So here we can see on the right that instead of just giving the answer in our example to the model, we actually give an example consisting of a series of steps that we can model as a simple path. Right? Actually, this shows that the model and its output will mimic this thing. It's a very interesting behavior, and the answer is going to be much more often correct. So that's what we refer to as the chain of thought prompting or chain of thought reasoning. After that, there were like a very large number of follow-up works that were kind of making this more and more elaborate. So for example, there was a work called self-consistency with chain of thought, which is basically like sampling multiple chains of thoughts and just selecting the most correct one. It also improved the accuracy of these models. Then there was the tree of thought paradigm, where the reasoning of the model was modeled as an arbitrary tree. So at every step, we can actually provide different next steps and then kind of select the best ones and maybe do some backtracking. Again, something even more elaborate to give us more robust reasoning. And then what we decided to introduce was basically the further step, the next step, graphical reasoning, that we can also call graph intelligence, where basically we are inspired by how we humans think. Because when you think about your reasoning process, if you, let's say, have some goal to be achieved, what you could do as a human, you could think up some idea, you could maybe then think up another idea, maybe you could then combine these ideas into an even better one, then use this idea to conduct some plan of action, then execute this action, arrive at some other follow-up ideas, and kind of repeat this process with coming up with ideas, combining them, trying different variants, and finally, at some point, hopefully arrive at your destination, your goal. Right? And now a very rhetorical question, does this structure on the left that you can see here, this example, resemble these fixed tree-like structures on the left? Well, not really, right? It's much more arbitrary. And that's why we introduced something that we call the graph of thoughts, where basically the reasoning can be modeled as an arbitrary graph. And our structure will be very brief today because I don't have much time. This structure introduces so-called thought transformation, where we have a principled way of guiding our reasoning or driving our DLLM reasoning. One of these transformations that generate where we sample multiple solutions, multiple next steps from a given step. That's what trial thought does as well. But then we also introduce the refined step, which is basically taking a given thought and making it better and better. And then we provide also the final step, the aggregation step, where we take different thoughts or different paths of reasoning and use synergy, make the output even better than the input pieces. Right, so that's graph of thoughts. We published this at our at AAAI, and also we have a very recent follow-up work which is coming out online today called the knowledge graph of thoughts, even more interesting for glaciation, which is basically how can we now make this graph of thoughts more connected with our working environment, our problem domain, with the knowledge graph, and make it basically a basis for affordable AI assistants able to solve different types of tasks. But what is most important is now how can we actually go from this graph intelligence or graph of thought paradigm to ethical digital sovereignty? When you think about it, it's actually quite simple. So one particular strength from modeling the reasoning as a graph is the fact that we can have transparency just by the design itself. Design, namely using the graph abstraction, because our reasoning is very explicit, right? So we have access to the way that the reasoning is structured because we have access to the structure of the graph, the structure of the nodes, and their edges between them, right? So our thoughts, our next step decisions by the LLM are the nodes. We can access them because we have logs of our reasoning process. This doesn't happen inside the weights; it happens outside the weights. Right? And edges are the logical semantic links. And we can now, for example, as humans, inspect, audit, and interpret the decision-making process of the LLM. Right? So it's very transparent and very, very auditable. It's very crucial for, basically, when you think about it, it's very crucial for accountable AI systems under sovereign governance. Another strict, very, very big benefit is the modularity and control. Again, the fact that we use the graph abstraction means that we can allow individual steps to be modular, inspectable, and replaceable. Right? So we can now take a smaller piece of the whole system reasoning and replace it with something that we prefer more. We can, for example, this means that we have more control over our digital infrastructures. Next advantage is resistance to manipulation. Right? So again, we have the fact that we have the graph structure explicitly available to us means that we reduce the opacity of the monolithic end-to-end LLM outputs. Right? So we no longer have this very, very fuzzy output that came somewhere from the weights. We can actually reveal the structure of reasoning that the model conducted. Right? So this, for example, helps with detecting hallucinations, biases, hidden assumptions, etc., etc. We could refer to this advantage as maintaining epistemic integrity of our LLM decision-making. Next is local optimization and governance. Right? So again, the graph abstraction comes in. We basically, for example, could enforce ethical constraints. Like we could think about, okay, we have now diversity of our ethical assumptions, our ethical systems, and we could, for example, model assumptions that we make in some decision process as our nodes, and then, for example, have edges that kind of are showing which of these assumptions are making influence onto which part of the decision process. Another thing is multi-agent democratic deliberation. Basically, we also show in our more recent works that we can model the collaboration of multiple agents, also such a graph, and this could also again become contribute to more to less opacity and more visibility and transparency of multi-agent reasoning systems. And finally, it's auditability and provenance. Right. So again, we have this traceable graph paths. Right. So that means that if there is like a very long and complex decision process taken by the model or augmented by the model, we enable long-term audit trails for basically digital accountability. So that's pretty much it. But I was really just a very brief mention because I was speaking a lot about this part on the right, the part about prompting. Right. So we have the ready model. This ready model we talked to and we use these prompts and they form these vertices. So that's very nice. But how about all this part on the left, like all this training? Like can we make the training and the emerging behavior from the model from the weights themselves also like more structured? Yes, we have also a paper for that. So there is a very recent outcome that we released called Reasoning Language Models: A Blueprint, where we basically take the recent class. So we probably all heard about DeepSeek and China AI, and also like the O1 model from OpenAI. So these are a very recent powerful model called Reasoning Language Models, RLMs. such as O3, DeepSeek, and QWQ. And we basically provide, and they made all of us on the internet. They are very, very powerful, very good at reasoning, and we provide a blueprint on how basically structure them under the unifying framework. And this framework also provides a way to provide the graph structure in it. So if you're interested in that part, please check this draft. So with this, I would like to wrap up, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
There's some comments in the chat. It might be a question. Maybe we have a question. I might be hopeful. Questions. Okay. And this, thanks for hosting. Student from Manchester. Oh, okay. Further to bridging efforts, the digital divide is pervasive amongst refugees and marginalized groups. Among those on how charities with little resources may balance the embracement of digital sovereignty from social good against the digital risks, such as techno-colonialism. So that isn't another fear, Maria. Thanks for hosting. Okay, so maybe it's a question for all of the keynote panelists here that we can answer.
Sounds generic.
Okay, my chair, as the first person to answer this. So basically, it's about the digital divide, pervasive among refugees and marginalized groups. And what does that mean for digital sovereignty?
Yep. I mean, I would say that that our work does it at a couple of different levels, and one of them is that all of our software, like the very, let's say, the most fundamental thing is that you want to make your software, your ideas open, right? And we make our all code, our implementations open. You can use it at will. They are all online. So that one thing is kind of like a general step we always take. But just in terms of the graph intelligence, I would say that it's precisely like one of the things it's doing precisely is that it gives you more transparency. It gives you, which means like you have potential to reduce your bias in your reasoning, right? So like if you have like a very large monolithic LLM which does some reasoning in its weights, it's virtually impossible to understand, for example, why there is a bias in this LLM, right? So it's very hard, and you can't really do it easily. But if you have this graph-based paradigm in your reasoning, where you have the explicit structure at hand, you can trace, for example, the bias in your reasoning to maybe like some smaller fine-grained steps, and you can identify the source of the bias easier, or some other inequality easier, and that's, I would say, also like a way to combat the mentioned issue. Thank you.
Thank you, my chair. And now we'll go to Pierre, because he's the next on our list. I don't know. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
I don't know yet. No, I have two questions. One about inspecting or the capability of inspecting upstream, the upstream process before you start to establish graph of thoughts that is in the raw material that you acquire. It's also full of already constituted biases, right? And so how do you get to that level?
I mean, just by inspecting the output from graph of thought would kind of help you track this, right? Because you will see this reasoning as it unfolds, right? And you will be able, for example, to maybe track and identify where the bias comes in the input data, right? Because you will see the sequence of steps taken, the decisions, and this could help you, for example, even track this back, right? So that's one potential way I would say how you could do it. Of course, you can, like do something with your input data or like the upstream part, but yeah, that's, I would say, a separate story.
Yeah, almost still.
No, but what? Go ahead.
But the bias tracing is one of the key activities for citing, right? Mm-hmm. So it's difficult because we are on both sides. I mean, you are in the inspecting side, given the fact that you deconstruct the graph of thought to see where problems may be, but you have yourself, your own let's say worldview at work when you do that. So the inspection of the inspection is something that is not so easy, right? I mean, so we have limits to this. Of course, that can be overcome to some extent by confronting different diversity. Diversity is probably one of the way to avoid sort of rebuilding one-sided monolithic thinking into the inspecting level. Oh, I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, so I would also have answered to that. It's basically our recent follow-up knowledge graph of thoughts. It's like the idea there is to is to basically, what you could do, you could now take this upstream input data or your task statement or whatever, and you could transform this into a structured form. So what we do basically is we've shown that by taking, let's say, a very wide and broad set of different tasks and transforming these tasks and like the specification of the task itself and the data used to solve the task, by collectively transforming this into a structured knowledge graph representation, it becomes much easier for the model to execute on such tasks because it sees a very structured set of triples instead of just a bulk of text. And I would say by doing that, you could minimize the risk of this, oversight of the oversight issue, because now the LLM itself might be able to detect the bias in an easier way, because it will see the structured information and thus will be able to identify like potential bias in an easier way. Right? So we kind of delegate this task to the LLM, and you hope it will have a bigger chance of actually tracking this. And while we didn't try specifically to detect bias in our use cases, it's such a broad spectrum of tasks that we did that I would say it would also bring advantages to that problem.
Maybe if I can add just to the conversation as well, I think that you can have a self-reflexivity. I completely agree that you need like a diversity of actors as the inspectors, but then if you take kind of Heidegger's kind of sociological analysis there, that you can have this element of self-reflection. But I think it's a very important debate. So I hope we touched upon it today a little bit as well. We still have a few more keynote speeches left. And next, I would like to introduce Dr. Wen Chen. Dr. Wen Chen is a co-founder and application scientist at Universal Lab, where he's working to revolutionize the way we approach scientific testing, using AI to make research more accessible, efficient, and impactful. Based in Malmö, Switzerland, Wen and his team are reimagining how we can connect measurement, AI, and innovation. So please, Dr. Wen, take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity to present our project and also our connection with this event. And so, firstly, I'll make a short introduction on, given the slide is not ready. So, my name is Wen Chen. I am Chinese. I started my PhD on materials science and engineering in EPFL in Lausanne and also Power Institute. So I started my PhD on nuclear materials. So to build a nuclear reactor and fusion reactor. Then after the PhD, I started my job as an application scientist and sales engineering in our ETH spin-off to sell the scientific instrument, like to measure the narrow mechanics of materials. So then in 2022, we started a company, Universal Lab. So, yeah, I have lived in Switzerland almost 10 years. Does it come?
There we are. Take a few seconds.
Yeah. So I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a material scientist. I also work partially on machine learning, but just a very small neural network, not a deep learning. So yeah, about Universal Lab. Universal Lab is working on AI-driven scientific testing and analysis. So we are committed to provide easy access and cheap scientific testing service, and to make research easy, to make the quality control easy, and to make the compliance testing easy. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Universal Lab. So what is a scientific testing and analysis? So a lot of people come to me. Normally they did a PhD to have in like in bioscience or in material science or in chemistry, and we are in this area. So more than 50% of our customers have a PhD actually. So scientific testing and analysis, which is the infrastructure and essentially for the high tech and deep tech area, especially in the bio-related, materials related, or chemistry related, or environmental related. Like the industry in the which included like the composition analysis, physical analysis, surface analysis, and microscope, like electron microscope imaging and mechanical testing, and like applied in the semiconductor materials industry, biotech, and also pharmacy, environmental tech, and also like the food tech, agriculture. So it is also applied in different steps of the industry, like in the art, research and development, like in the production, in the quality control, in the regulation compliance, because like sell the food or sell the medicals must get all like a regulation compliance or get all accreditation. So which is means personally it lead very complex scientific instrument, need very complex expertise, how to use this scientific instrument, how to analyze the data, how to interpret the data. So, and also it is an essential lead for different kind of high-tech, deep-tech industry. And also it's a platform technology and platform lead. It lead from different industry, from different discipline, from different steps, different chain of the production of chain of research and development. So I make a short example about like this. For example, one of our customer who is from semiconductor company, and they have like a wafer. Okay, they want to know the wafer thickness and the doping level of different elements in the wafer, and then we take the sample to the lab, and the lab use the different kind of high-end scientific instrument to analyze the sample, and then we then get the data, measurement data, and but we still need some kind of software algorithm to analyze the data and get the results of the like structure, results of different element analysis or the microstructure, microscope, and then we use the results for scientific research, for the technology research and development, for quality control or compliance control, and or even for the troubleshooting and failure analysis. So this is our example in the big scope. And so, sorry. Yeah. So we are a startup, we are a company. So what kind of challenge, problem we have see, and what kind of opportunity we have see? We believe firstly, after the fabless, we believe it will be the labless. That means in the future, especially in the high tech or deep tech industry, a lot of companies they do not need to invest or build up of such kind of complex testing lab or analysis lab. Firstly, they do not need to invest to buy such kind of scientific instrument. Do not need to hire the experts like PhDs because it's too expensive and also not high efficient. Why? I gave an example like the material testing. Materials is very important, is a substantial industry for other industries. Like when we talk about the human civilization, we are normally talking about different materials we use, like the Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and the age of semiconductor, age of nanomaterials, and age of quantum materials. So we are talking about materials. So firstly, it's very important. Then when we say right now, as the time is going, we found the analytical instrument and expertise become more and more complex, and also the cost, importance of testing and analysis become more and more important. In ancient time, we just need a microscope, or even a technician who can already do the research work. And and in maybe 20, 30 years later ago, in the steel industry, they just need a microscope. And right now, like in the semiconductor industry, nanoscience industry, pharmacy, biotech, they lead like the spectroscope, lead the transmission electron microscope, a cryo-TEM, and a nanomechanics. So they lead such kind of instrument is very expensive, very complex, and need a very high-end expertise to use it. So they need to invest for such kind of transmission electron microscope. It's cost around 2 million euro, and we need to hire a team of PhD to do this work. So that means that for the startups, for small team, for small research groups, they do not have such kind of ability to build up such kind of elements. So that's why we think in the future it will be labless. And also a larger belief is after the lab digitalization, it will be lab intelligentization. Yeah. We believe that the AI-driven robots and agents will be heavily involved in the scientific analysis and testing workflow. So we focus on testing and analysis, not focusing on the research. Research is a big pipeline. You have to find the idea and find the design and to synthesize the sample, test the sample, and get the protocol and small volume production, large volume production. So we focus on the testing and analysis. So in the future, we think like the AI, which can. So here is how the video. This works. So like the AI agent can work in to provide the technical consultant, to plan the testing, to operate the experiment, and to analyze the data and to write the report. So around more than 7 to 8% of the work in the testing lab can be done by AI agents and AI-powered robots. So this is not dream. This is already come true in our business. So when we think when we break down the testing working flow, scientific testing workflow, normally it comes like a technical communication, testing protocol generation, and experiment operation. And then we get the raw data. We have data analysis, data visualization, and result interpretation, and data report writing. So what our solution is, we found in these 8 steps, 7 of them need a PhD level expertise. So we firstly use AI agents to optimize or replace such kind of like a human expertise and dependence steps. And in the next step, we also try to when we have like AI robots, so we can have all the process can be driven by AI. So we already can cut 70% of the cost and shorten 70% of effective time. When we're looking at just the single steps, the efficiency improve will be 100 times. And the most important, it can broaden the numerical, analytical, and testing service scope, because for human PhD, I only know very narrow level. So, but for AI, for well-trained AI agent, it can know different area. So, for example, we take with the AI agent, we can write or scientific testing report, which once lead a PhD to write in 6 hours at a cost of 600 francs. Right now, it just need an undergraduate and AI agent, just 15 minutes, and it costs just 15 francs. So there's still there's a big challenge and also a big opportunity in this area, but there's still a lot of technology challenge, so which is not be solved yet. When we're trying to sell such kind of solutions, agents to our customers, but most of them will come up a question like last month have like a demo meeting with a manufacturer, a researcher in a solar panel in Oxford, and they are interested in trying to use our AI agent to analyze our X-ray diffraction data. So because they generate hundreds of data from hundreds of samples per day, which is right now analyzed by human beings. So they want to use but they are satisfied with our technology, our product. But when they come up question, how do you make sure our data, our intellectual property is safe? So that question make me envious because we cannot give a nice answer to that. So we found 8%, more than 8% of our customers will come up with this question. How can we ensure the security of my data and intelligent properties? And right now, most of them just sign an NDA with us. Before signing the NDA, they cannot talk anything to us. And another question is, so for the small startups and for the like the PhD student professors, they can use a cloud-based one. They can come up with such a question. But for the big companies or middle-sized companies, they still not trust us. So they want, okay, can we deploy such kind of assistant agents locally? But our current answer is it's very expensive. So how can we make this be employed and contributed to, massively to every company? So we have to make this a cost-effective, convenient, and efficient way. So we still, these two questions is raised by, a lot of companies or researchers in this area. So, but we still not have answer for that. If you have any idea or interest or solution in this aspect, or if you have any interest to know our company, to know our products, please feel free to reach out to me. Let's drive scientific discovery and in technology innovation together and safely. Thank you.
Any questions? I know there's another question in the chat. Yeah. So we'll go ahead. But there's a rather, let's see, we lose the mouse here. Oh, there you go. Got the right two laptops here, makes it confusing. Okay, let's see. And I have to read from here. That's amazing. Thank you. So, okay, so they were very happy with the last question.
Yeah.
But we'll have another opportunity to ask Wen any questions you have. And you also have Wen's email here if you want to get directly in touch with him. I'm not sure. I think Menshu is joining us now, right?
Minshen. Yeah,
Minshen.
It's online. Yeah.
Are you online, Minshen? So I'd like to give you just give us open your camera if you are, so we know you're here.
Yeah, Minshen is our CTO right now. He's in Germany. So.
Hi, I'm Minshen, and yeah, I'm in Germany currently. Nice to meet you. Oh, thanks.
So, Minshen, the floor is yours. Please take it away. I'm going to spotlight you now, and please do share your screen.
Can you explain?
I do not have a presentation.
Oh, he doesn't have a okay. No,
presentation.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Ready to if you have any question, can answer it. So.
Does anyone have any questions for Minshen? Okay. Where you're here and he's available if needed. If not, we'll be heading to our final speaker for today then. Dr. I'm going to probably butcher his surname, but I'm going to try anyhow. Manis Barmapanakis. It was good enough. Okay. Dr. Manus Barbonakis is the CEO. I'm getting a PhD now in Greek surnames. So Chakvitmatis. Okay, no, I think I had it. I almost had it there. He's the CEO and co-founder of Mobilities, an EPFL spin-off using cutting-edge data science and drone technology to transform urban mobility. With a background in transportation engineering and a passion for innovation, Manus combines academic depth with entrepreneurial drive to tackle congestion and shape the future of autonomous transport in Europe. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Manos. Please, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm wondering how many of you have been stuck in traffic and, instead of spending time with your loved ones, with friends and family, you're stuck in your car and you're thinking, the problem is getting worse and worse. Nobody's doing anything about it, right? So if you can connect with this one, you may find this presentation a little bit interesting, and I will tell you how we have been dealing actually with this problem in mobilities. The problem we're facing is that, trust me, there are people out there in the cities that are trying to solve the problem. There are amazing engineers. There are politicians that really care about your well-being and your everyday life. But there is the issue of data. There are many cities out there that want to become more sustainable, but they keep ignoring bicycles, they keep ignoring pedestrians, and they keep focusing on cars. So then I'm wondering, how can you become more sustainable if you cannot actually quantify the problem that you are trying to solve, right? For those who love numbers, I have included here some big numbers of what is the size of the problem we're dealing with. And in mobilities, what we provide is actually an all-in-one service. We are trying to enhance mobility for cities, at the same time supporting their sustainability goals. How exactly do we do that? Okay, so you can see here that this is a screenshot from a drone, but you can stay with me, we're not another drone company, right? The drones for us is just one tool. So as long as you get one of those low-cost drones out of a supermarket, you can use them as our sensor and we can collect the data that we need. So we fly our drones, we can monitor mobility, and you can see here, later I have some more interesting slides. We can track every different type of vehicle, including pedestrians, bicycles, motorcycles, buses. So we know what is moving on the ground, right? And what is interesting here is that we do this in a privacy-friendly way. And this is how my talk today is also connected to the thematic area of this project, because honestly, when we first founded Mobilities, I am a transportation geek, right? So when I was communicating what we do in Mobilities, for me, the most exciting stuff was the technology behind this and the traffic engineering and all the cool stuff we do there. But I realized that our customers and cities out there, what they really care about was GDPR. Do you fly your drone safely? Is my data safe? So that was the main question. And we saw that many people converged there. So here you can see some results that we have from the city of Helsinki, where the city was interested in knowing how many of the pedestrians that are exiting the port are going to take public transport, how many are picked up by friends or getting a taxi, and how many of them are getting a bicycle or a scooter. So you can see here that we can track the pedestrians. The video is not very, very smooth. For those who are more interested, you can see it later. But the level of detail we can achieve is even which door of the tram each pedestrian can join, and then can go in. And then maybe some of you are wondering, okay, how is this privacy friendly? Well, we do not see vehicle plates. We do not see faces. And that means that all the information that we are collecting cannot really relate to personal information. So as a traffic engineer, that for me is a treasure. I have all the data I need to do all the analysis I want, and I have no issues with collecting the data I need because I'm not a police officer. I don't want to give a ticket if this guy is speeding, right? I just want to know how much fast he's going. And then if he's unsafe, then I can propose some measures in order to make it more safe or to reduce congestion or, maybe to communicate that, man, you're in your car being stuck in this large queue of cars while you could just get your scooter and be much, much faster. So this is a market that is growing. We believe there is a lot of potential there. And this is why we believe that such topics are going also to be interesting for a variety of players and big players out there. Now, a little bit to connect more what we're discussing here is that we have seen that cities must have control of their data. And I'm saying must because currently the solutions that are out there have, let's say, some disadvantages. Let me start by this last one, high cost and limited customization. So we know that there are some great solutions out there that most of the times are black boxes, and they cannot really adapt to the needs of an advancing city. And to give you a very fast example, bad memory, good example, is with COVID. So there, we suddenly had the whole system, transportation system mainly, I'm talking about collapse, right? So we saw that cities needed to have fast and good data on a different other topic. That was not possible. At the same time, when they are trying to get some data on bicycles, on pedestrians, then they get some other issues on, will my system work? Will the camera that I have installed works on this kind of data that I need? This is not always sure. Then, with this kind of data, we also get the privacy and data sovereignty risks that we're discussing. And finally, the dependence on external vendors. On a project that we're discussing now with the Swiss motorways, I was very, very positively surprised that one of the priorities was actually the data that we are collecting, although they are GDPR friendly, although we cannot relate to private information, we needed the videos to stay in Switzerland, right? We needed the analysis to stay here, not for any other reason, mainly for safety. And what we do in Mobilities is all in-house. So we realized that this was one of our strong points that we believe is also important for how we continue. So yeah, we are, I believe, an example of a self-reliant and ethical use of AI and mobility data solutions. We're having an end-to-end approach. That means that we organize the drone flights, we collect the data, we analyze the data, and after we analyze those kind of data, we can propose to the city some insights in order to take this action. We align with the EU's push for sustainability and digital sovereignty. And this is something that, to be honest, was not in our minds at all when we started Mobilities. It was mainly about the technology, it was mainly about the innovation, but we realized that as long as these three bullets are part of our business model, are part of our vision, this is how we can go forward. And until now, we have conducted experiments in many countries all around the world. We started our trip from EPFL. Very proud for our team. We are a team of mainly EPFL alumni. And what motivates us is not only to provide solutions to the city, but at the same time to keep innovation and the use of AI at a high level. And I'm very happy to be here, present Mobilities, and answer any other questions that might be in the audience or the online users. So thanks a lot.
I do have one question for you. So, if I have this correctly, the drones are picking up the car information, right, and then converting it, right, so that you cannot see what color, any information about it, right? But aren't you capturing the images of the vehicles themselves? So, and how does that work with GDPR legislation? Like, is it anonymized directly? So the software itself, like, that bit I don't understand. So just a little bit more clarity there.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. It gives me the opportunity to describe a little bit our technology. Yes, we do capture the traffic scene. We do capture all vehicles. We do not, though, transform anything on the screen. So all the vehicles that you see there are being detected, are being tracked, but they are tracked as vehicle trajectories. Right? So then we give, let's say, an anonymized ID to the tracked object that we have. We know if it's a car, if it's a pedestrian, if it's a bicycle, and then by following its trajectory, we can know the speed, the acceleration, where it started, and where it went. And what we realize is that if we know the color of the car, it's not important. If we know the size of the car, it's not important. if we know the vehicle plate of the car, this is where there is a strong no-go. This is why the videos that I shared before, you can see that they are always from this top-bottom view. And to be honest, for me, as a company, this, let's say I'm losing sight. If I had my camera over an angle, I could see more of the road, I could see more phenomena, I could provide a better product, but I would jeopardize privacy. This is why we based our product on this top-bottom view, that we decided that this is going to maximize, we are going forward with that, we're going to maximize our quality with that, although we're losing, let's say, on the length of scene that we can identify. Hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you, Dr. Manos Bourmatpanakis. I feel like I did a tongue twister there. So now that takes us to the end of the keynote session. We'll begin the panel sessions, and we have an exciting panel for you today. I won't do the introduction because I have a dear friend and colleague who will be running and moderating the panels. But maybe as he sets up, you can grab a few chips. I've already grabbed a few. Just for a few seconds and we'll begin.
Thank you very much, Alex Borges. My name is Babis Hadjimalis. Thank you very much, dear friend Mano Barbounaki. As pointed out, let's have a short break of like 5 minutes so that we can grab a coffee, a chip, some chips, and then we can also update the table with the panelists. So like 2, 3, 5 minutes of a break so that we can all get ready. And I will call the panelists to take a coffee and also join us in the table. Thank you. Greetings again. I hope you had a fantastic break. We will continue with our panel discussions. The idea is to have a discussion to provide the opportunity to the keynote speakers as well as to 2 additional experts and to the overall field to provide us with some information, receive your discussions, and somehow close today's dissemination event, which was actually, I think, quite impactful. And you can also have a seat here as well, dear colleague and friend Alex. The overall idea, okay, we have split it in a way, this dissemination event part, inside at least the Lisbon Council team, part has been led by my dear friend and colleague Alex, and the second part that involves too many Greeks by myself so that I can properly pronounce their names. So my name is Babis Hadjimalis, I'm a political scientist. Today we have again in the panel Maciej Wajda from the ETH, Stelios Konstantinou, and GDPR expert and lawyer who, I mean, everyone will again, at least the 2 speakers that haven't already been introduced, they will provide us with a short introduction by themselves. You from ETH, a master student, and again, our dear friend Manos Barbounakis from Mobilities. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to this part of the dissemination event on digital sovereignty in fractured times. The overall notion of sovereignty for us political scientists and for the ones of the classic studies, and we're moving forward with this dissemination event, had always to do with borders, with treaties, with the ways that we are participating or with the rights that we have as citizens. As we are progressing, as technologies bring us together and is being more connected, we realize that sovereignty means the ability to govern data flows, ensure privacy, secure infrastructure, and other ways and other things while we're trying to advance sustainability, innovation, and human rights. I have kept some notes which I'm actually reading because glaciation and these things, this discussion here, it's not an easy thing for someone that doesn't really have a technical expertise and a technical background. So this is also the idea of this panel, and it is also part of our obligation within the glaciation project to provide the results, to proceed with sharing the knowledge in an easy, digestible, from a way that everyone can really understand and have the ability to use this information for his or her own advantages. Thus, in a way, glaciation, it is, and projects like glaciation are not simply research, innovation, actions, activities, initiatives. There are ways to test, there are ways to somehow advance the way, the role, the position that Europe is charting its very own course, combining AI, combining cloud-edge computing, privacy by design architectures, in order to build systems that are secure, that are accessible, that are intersectional, that are green, that are accountable. So this way is anything but simple. So this is why we will try today here to have this discussion. We have already pointed out many times that we are living in a fragmented time, that we have different geopolitical realignments, we have climate instability, we are experiencing an explosion of disruptive technologies. Thus, we do need to rethink the very digital foundations and the digital world as we see today. And here comes the actual question, which will guide the panel discussion. How can we harmonize our core values, privacy, sustainability, and innovation, while building a resilient and autonomous Europe? I will give you all the opportunity to provide us with some ideas, some personal experiences, your overall background, and then we can proceed with some questions from the audience. I will start from you, and we can go this way randomly to the rest of the panelists. So,
sure,
there you are. And before doing that, this is impolite, but I will do it. Partner glaciation project and a real voyager, someone who really experiences the overall term of glaciation, and he will let us know more about that. So
okay, thanks. So as for the main question, I would really focus on the ground intelligence that I spoke about already, and because that's really the underlying theme that pretty much when you are iterating over all these kind of issues that we have, like how can we ensure sovereignty, how can we ensure like a bias, or let's minimize bias and our privacy. So like the key, I would say, challenge at the same time as the solution is, of course, one of the big parts is the ongoing AI revolution and the scope of the impact of this new technology on our lives is kind of unprecedented in a sense. I would say feeling going to be more impactful than, for example, smartphones or some other inventions like that. And again, this technology by design is very hard to, for example, interpret, or very hard to audit, or very hard to really explain. For example, the model is if you just have a very large monolithic system with its weights, it's pretty much impossible to really understand why you have a token like this coming out of the model, right? There are some works trying to explore this direction. There's actually a very recent paper from Anthropic, which was basically released like a week ago, which is providing, as a matter of fact, a tool that they call attribution graphs to explain why these models work like they work. And that's exactly what I think is one. I'm not saying it's going to be like the only way to do it, but a good contender, a good candidate for making the model more transparent and sustainable is vast securing all these issues. You said is exactly ground intelligence. A way to model, to explicitly build a structure on the way those things will operate, so that we have access to the fine-grained decisions, the fine-grained steps in the reasoning. And that's one thing I would suggest. And you also mentioned things like privacy, and of course you also have like privacy, like one of the bigger solutions, or let's say like solutions for privacy is using, for example, retrieval augmented generation, like one of the, like another big piece of the AI landscape. Retrieval, so you actually use external data sources to store your information which you don't want to leak into the weights, right? And again, you have graph databases that can help you with that. So the structured reasoning is something I would pretty much take a look at more carefully in the first place on how to tackle all these issues. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions, points, remarks? Anyone? Please, Alex.
I must ask, so how is this connected to your expeditions? I described you as an explorer. I received 100 photos yesterday of my chair in the frozen north in Siberia. So I'm really curious about that question. And this question is one that I really want to know.
It's actually quite good as well. So as Alex said, I'm also consulting companies not only in AI and high performance computing, but also in the coldest and most remote mountain ranges and plateaus on planet Earth. So I like to solve problems which will be understood as climbing the unclimbed mountains and crossing the uncrossed plateaus, very cold and very remote. For example, like the nearest human beings are 500 kilometers away from where I am. And actually, as a matter of fact, AI graphs are actually very strongly related to it, because one of the projects I'm now leading is how to make such expeditions, not just mine, but like in general exploration, understood as moving around or progressing in a very challenging environment, very challenging terrain, how to make them more efficient by actually using AI and graphs. So the idea there is to basically, if you have, for example, an expedition like arbitrary places in the ocean or maybe a polar expedition in the Antarctic, and you usually want to get efficiently from point A to point B to do something on the way, right? And now the point is that you want to minimize your fuel expenditure, you want to minimize energy consumption, you want to maximize the efficiency of the route, and for this we are trying to basically use a set of AI models that are going to analyze the satellite photos with high resolution, and then use the graph abstraction to actually drive the route generation and drive process for example, a given boat or a given machine, or maybe for myself when I'm trying to cross a plateau on my own skis. So that's how it could, for example, combine these two.
Thank you. Any other questions, points? Then I will give the microphone, floor, to our dear friend and guest, Stelios Konstantinou, GDPR expert, lawyer, representative in many European projects, who can actually provide us first with an introduction to himself, and then with some information about the overall discussion here. There you are.
You forgot to mention good-looking guy. Okay. Anyway, very loud, but I'm going to allow it. Can you please remind me the question? Because
For sure. How can we harmonize the very core values of privacy, sustainability, innovation, while building a resilient and autonomous Europe? And there is also the question that has to do with regulations and legal frameworks like GDPR and how they could support innovations and projects like Glaciation.
So interesting topic, especially now, where the worldwide landscape is shifting drastically, right? And there is a question in Europe where we talk about whether this over-regulation takes us back and what are we going to do in terms of competition. You have China, not China, this is not a good example, but you have the US, which quite recently signed, go and train your models freely. We don't care about anything, you know. The new president, Mr. Trump, signed many acts that gave a free ride to many tech companies on training models. You have India, who's training models freely without any constraints. And yet you have Europe who says, let's regulate this, let's regulate that. And many understand this overregulation as a problem. My opinion is that this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to utilize this over-regulatory scheme, if you like, to create different quality products, either is AI models or compete in a market, but with different quality products. You know, I'm sure many of you are participating in many projects where GDPR is obligatory and you're ticking boxes and giving consent, and you hear about trainings and privacy by design and by default. Am I right? Have you ever done any training? Any of you? Yeah? Okay. So I'm sure you must have heard privacy by design and by default. So what's that? This is the principle that when we design something, we must design it with having the GDPR, you know, designed based on the principles of the GDPR, which are enforced by default. Okay? Why is this important? Because that way you can create a system which can operate without having troubles and problems like, for example, do you know the right to be forgotten, right? So let's see, we train a model with Babis data for 2 years, okay? Babis withdraws his consent, which is obligatory, by the way, and says, okay, delete my data, which is his right. What happens to the model? From a legal perspective, this is a clash between the intellectual property right and the intellectual property and data protection rights. This is a legal issue, and this is a thing that has to do with a model and its operation and how it's working without any harm. So I think, first, the regulatory framework in Europe, it's rich, if one can say that, but that's good because people like me have work to do and are necessary, first. But second, I believe it provides a very good opportunity to have competing products. But it is important, in order for these tools to be useful and not a nuisance, to understand them correctly. I hope we'll have a chance to talk again later on, but I'm sure that not many of us, when we hear things like GDPR, for example, do not have the correct notion in mind. Would anyone help me when we talk about GDPR? What comes to mind?
Accept all cookies.
Yeah, accept all cookies and how to hide data, how to keep confidential information. Is that correct? Do everyone agree with that statement?
It's a silent agreement.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not correct. The GDPR is a way, the road, how to handle information when it's out of your home, let's say, when you do it professionally. It's nothing about confidentiality. However, this is how the market handles it, and that's the first problem. Everyone sees it as an urgent. They say, this is not personal data. Take it out of my head, okay? But it's not, or the usual suspect. I saw this on the internet, so it's not covered under the GDPR. You must have met it in the past, but it's not the same. There are rules. And if we understand those rules correctly, and Aristoteles used to say the problem is not to know, I don't know the correct word, but to be, not have knowledge, but to have a semi-knowledge.
To be aware.
What?
To be aware.
Mind aware, to think you know something, but not know. I think that's the main problem. And that's the opportunity. If we understand the opportunity that the regulation in Europe provides, we can create quality products that can support the operation of nations, that can support the human resources of companies, that can give a new definition to quality in terms of the technological perspective. That's it for now. Thank you.
Yes, proud. Any questions? Thank you. Anyone?
I like to look to me first.
Anyone with any questions? Please.
I do have a question. So let's take GDPR or the EU AI Act or the data DGA, right?
DSA, DMA,
all of them, right? So the intent behind them is very good, in my personal opinion, because you're trying to do the right thing, whatever that means, right? However, in my experience as somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, is that when it comes to the actual implementation of those is where things start falling apart, because there is just no technology that can enforce those rules on data. So that's where aberrations come up where people start saying, well, let me start ticking boxes, right? And say, I have met the requirements without really doing anything with the data. So the intent gets lost. Or for example, take the EU AI Act, right? A simple requirement that governance information should be included in the data set. Now, any AI model uses tons of data, and the data comes from God knows where. You'll never be compliant, right? If you really look at the strict letter of the law. So I think there's a gap between the intent and the operational day-to-day reality of actually working with data, with technology. So long story, but my question is like, what are your thoughts around that?
So thank you. I agree totally. But again, I come back to my first argument. I think the first step to enforce regulatory text is to understand it. For example, let's say again, GDPR. GDPR, the first step of enforcing GDPR in a company or in a public sector domain or whatever is starting when you enter a building and you give your data to the security in the reception, and there is no notice, which is the basic. You talked about the EU AI Act. Everything is based. They have a common denominator, which is called transparency. We provide our data in general, in abundance, and we do not have clear information on what happens, not with AI models, but when we visit a building like this. Do we know who receives our data? How long are they stored? Do we know in our companies? Not, of course, many of you may know, but I mean, there are many companies out there that they do not have information on critical things like how long we keep the data of our personnel when they leave and why. The same. So if that happens to our basic modus operandi, let's go to the EU AI Act. Of course, there are issues, but the legislation is there to set the goal and start from that. Of course, it's difficult. And let me add to your thoughts another thought. With the speed that technology is evolving, how can we regulate it correctly? The EU AI Act, it might now be redundant because technology moves so radically, and we need to examine, to explore the option to regulate in real-time regulation, if that's possible, because we cannot follow through. Technology is very fast, and you cannot meet all the standards. And I'm a lawyer. I specialize in tech law. I really like reading legislations like the GDPR and AI Act and stuff. And I cannot finish the AI Act. It's crazy. I cannot. I'm lost in the articles. It's very difficult to understand it, to comprehend it, and to enforce it. To consult the company responsibly and say these are the ways. It's very difficult. So I agree that there are challenges in enforcing it, but that now that enforcing it is an obligation, there is a goal. So many companies will, even trying to follow through, it's a first step, it's a first win.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much as well. Any other questions in the back, maybe? No? Okay. Then I will move to the third panelist, you are an emerging researcher in ETH. I will simply give you the microphone so that you can provide us with your opinion on the overall discussion that we are currently having, and then come back with some particular questions. So there you are.
Thank you for the introduction. And so I would like to first talk about data privacy from the perspective of students at ETH, starting for example. And I think one important thing is that also we need some creative ways to raise the awareness of letting all the students or also other people know that the importance of data privacy. And one example that I had was that I was So daily I check my emails, and there was once where I received an email from similarly also ETH, some ETH institute, saying that, actually we have new bicycle rental policy. You can get very cheap bicycles, and it just seemed like a ETH email. And then I click on it, and I was prompted to give my password and username of my ETH data domain. And then I gave it. And interestingly, it was a phishing email, but luckily it was not from any malicious third party, but it was from the ETH itself. And I think that was one thing that really got into my mind, and I was aware of the data privacy afterwards and starting to use, let's say, password managers or really check the agreements after getting to some new apps or whatever. So this is some very small things that happen just in daily life, but this is such creative trainings or ways could be important to raise just the awareness. And about more technical part, I would say, for example, for AI models that we talk about a lot today, one very important thing is to open source or to use the open source resources. And we care about the data privacy, so probably we would like to self-host the LLM models and to use, let's say, like the open source model Ollama or DeepSeek family. Or if we talk about visual language models, we can choose, for example, small VLM from Hugging Face or Gemma from Google. These are models that could be also self-host if you choose a small enough model set. But then we come with the problem that if you self-host and if you are limited to small models, how can you effectively use the small models? Because small models, they tend to hallucinate a bit more. So meaning that you probably get falsely fabricated information. And that is part of the work that we were doing, how to actually ensure this trackability of the solution provided by LLM. And that was Marcia also talked about, like we can leverage this graph-based structure in order to have more trackable reasoning processes of LLM to avoid hallucination. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Questions, points? No, it's another keynote speech. Thank you very much. Last panelist. Hopefully, we can also come back with some questions on the last panelist or to the whole panelists here. Manos, you are a researcher, you are a CEO, you have founded your own company. That's the question follows. What role do startups, companies, innovators like you play in integrating AI and data solutions that align with Europe's overall digital sovereignty, as we are discussing today, and the overall sustainability solutions that we are exploring, and how these are connected with and in the mobility sector? And please, thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think the biggest challenge from our side can be summarized is not to be carried away. When this idea with the drones tracking vehicles, using it for mobility came into our minds, the first thing that we thought was, okay, this is the definition of having privacy issues. We're using drones, we're tracking people, we're tracking vehicles. So we could see that the technological potential was there, right? We had done, let's say, we had seen some videos from the creative industry, and we knew that there is something there. But then we wanted to know what is the legal legislation, what are the rules that are out there, so that we can take this technology and make it accessible. And this was, let's say, something that until now in our lab was not something that we were dealing with. In transportation, many studies, and for many years we have been dealing either with simulated data or with data that are anonymized at source. So for us, that was really a new environment. We had so many questions, and we had to take it from somewhere. And what we did is that actually during our incubating stage at EPFL, we conducted an experiment in Nairobi, in Kenya. And there, traffic congestion is awful, but at the same time, they really want to fix the problem, right? So when we presented the solution of drones, what they told us is that no way, you cannot do this. In Nairobi, you're not even allowed to take a photo with your phone because of security, right? If you you see something interesting on the street, right, and you want to take a photo, you might get arrested. This is the rules. But by building the technology around an argumentation of how we can adapt it to what we're doing and how we can adapt it in respecting privacy, we managed to do an experiment with 10 drones flying at the same time over the city center of Nairobi. What I'm trying to say here is that my experience from the technology we're using has always started, let's say, from that point of view. Drones are being infamous for disrupting airport operations, for causing problems at people's privacy by following them around, or like from paparazzis that are taking some secret shots and stuff, right? So they have always been popular for the bad reasons. Our then narrative had to change on that. We had to say that, guys, yes, this is a tool, but we can use it for something good. And we saw that many people converged to that, and this is how we had to start from our narrative, because the moment we started talking about technology, everyone would be like, you're talking about drones, and how can you make it work? The moment they would get, let's say, the secure answer that what we can do can work in a technical way, but at the same time without causing any issues, this is when we knew that we would have a success with the city or the customer. I don't know if, I can keep going on how many cities have asked this kind of question and how we persuaded all of them. But I think the most important, let's say, challenge as a researcher and as an entrepreneur would be to try and integrate all these exciting tools that are out there in an ethical way that can be then be, as discussed before by Sterios, an opportunity. Sometimes, having limits on research or having limits on entrepreneurship might sound a little bit containing, but I feel when you have these containts, it gives you an opportunity to think out of the box, to pivot a little bit around, and in the end, have something that works under the lines, have the rules, give me the rules of the game, and I will play with the game.
Any questions?
Yeah, I
Go.
I do actually have how many would you say countries in the global south have you worked with for this project?
So we have conducted the experiment in one country, the global south, but we are collaborating with an NGO that is trying to promote the solution that we have in many countries. So we have talked with more than 5 or 6, if I remember well. In 4 months from now, we are going to conduct an experiment in Dakar, in Senegal. And then there are some other candidate cities that are following. What we need to consider is that sometimes it's not only enough to persuade about the technology itself, but you also have to follow some political situations. You have to, let's say, follow some other aspects that are not really in our hands. So our strategy on that is to have something rigid, to be able to show that the technology works and has solved some problems in many different parts of the world. And then we can, let's say, select where this solution will be applied. Something that might, let's say, be a little bit counterintuitive is that although we are fighting traffic congestion, and traffic congestion is a global problem, it doesn't mean that the solution is the same. the traffic congestion that you have in London, in Zurich, or in Athens, or in Dakar, it's very, very different. At the same time, not all cities have the same tools to fight this war. For example, my technology in the city of Zurich would be useless. And would be useless because Zurich has invested a lot for many, many years in having cameras, in having sensors, in having loop detectors that work and work well. And it's a system that can be sustained well. But this is not the case for most cities in Switzerland or Europe. So this is why we're also trying to adapt our technology in terms of being flexible, in terms of reusing technology that is out there. For example, the drones that we are using, as I said before, is not something special. You can use the same drone for environmental purposes, for creative purposes, or for monitoring wildlife. You can do the same for monitoring mobility.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Specifically or generally?
That's a great point. So generally, if you have a general one, let's give it for the second as a second question.
Specific question.
The specific question. Please.
Specific question is, so I wanted to know, do you only collect data or you provide some solutions to the cities? So, okay, we could gather this data and according to some our knowledge, you should put another road crossing here or something.
Thank you for the question. We do both. We collect the data, and because the data after our initial analysis are anonymized, we're always happy to share with local partners. That could be cities, that could be universities. Actually, the whole idea of mobility started from an open science initiative. When we first conducted our initial experiment in Athens with 10 drones, we published all this data. And when we first did it, people in academia were calling us crazy. And they were calling us crazy because I come from a very conservative academic sector where having the data in your drawer would be the normal practice. But what I noticed is that after we had the chance to communicate the data and after other researchers had the chance to work with this kind of data, they could appreciate our work more. They could see what is the level of detail you get from this data. They could see how difficult it is to work with this data. And at the same time, they could come up with their ideas and they could contribute in this domain that was also new for us. So that is, let's say, the part of the question that is related to the data production. Yes, we are always happy to act as data collectors, but also data distributors. What does though Mobilis is unique is that we go from A to Z. We don't just collect the data, give them to our customers, and then ciao. That would be a road to failure because data from drones have been collected the last 5 or 6 years, and it started from our group. So it's not really something that even top traffic engineers out there have been familiar with working with. So this is what we saw as an opportunity to provide an all-in-one service. We collect the data, we analyze the data, and at the end, we also provide solutions based on this kind of data. And just to close my answer, not to take any time from other people, we believe that by doing that, we can also keep the level of our product very, very high. The moment you take a piece of the puzzle, or let's say a factor out of the equation, the whole system can reduce the capacity. So this is also one of our principles.
Thank you. Orestes, I think you have a general question.
We're going to the general.
Let's go to general question, yeah.
Okay, so I have to protect my reputation as the doom guy from previous glaciation panels. So it's all good talking about consumer rights and personal rights and privacy violations, things like that. But I really think that the way the winds are blowing, national security and like existential dangers and things like that are going to become more and more prevalent in the conversation. Europe was depending on other partners to do a lot of the dirty work on surveillance and hard power and things like that. It looks like we'll have to get our hands dirty now. So what happens when AI goes into things like, autonomous drones, handing over control of weapon systems to artificial intelligence, things that really no one wants to kind of focus on, but somebody will have to deal with it sooner or later. And then, this mentality of this level of regulation is going to be very difficult to defend and maintain when national security and European security is going to really be on the table. So how do we feel about that? Are we going to be able to maintain this level of responsibility and delicate regulation work when a weapons industry comes and says, like China is developing this, USA is developing this, they have a response time in, I don't know, nanoseconds for their weapon systems. If you don't let us incorporate an AI, we're not compatible with that. We're not competent. How are we gonna handle this?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you. And I will actually give the microphone to all panelists. So I will have a different answer from all of you. So one by one, very democratically.
So that's a complex issue. I would say economic intelligence. Again, explainability and the ability to dig into this data and to dig into this complex issue.
Thank you.
So the question has two levels, let's say 2 layers. First is the political one. Could we give if I understand correctly, please give me some rope if I'm mistaken. Can we give the keys to defense to the AI? As a fan of the Terminator, I wouldn't try. But nevertheless, you're right. We have a thing of evolution, right? While you mentioned the rights, EU made some, from a legal perspective, some very clever exceptions. So the GDPR, everything has to do with national security is accepted. So the national security services in every country monitors, especially in Greece, huge scandals. We had huge scandals because they were monitoring the ministers, political leaders. But okay, from GDPR perspective, they were exempted, national security. The same goes for almost every regulatory framework that puts prohibitions, because when it comes to national security, it's a very good excuse for political powers to restrain some rights. And there comes the second, one other layer, which is nowadays defense is not only having rockets or combating rockets, it's cyber security. I was in charge of handling a data breach in the Ministry of Culture in Greece. And I was shocked on the level of awareness, on the low level of awareness for the people. Because I understood that many countries, not just Greece, many countries back then didn't have a plan if a cyber incident occurs on a national level, I was under the impression that they did, but they don't. The same goes for the EU. Now they funded a huge Rearm Europe fund, which is quite important, but it's boomer because you have to spend 1/3 at least or the half on cybersecurity. And then the second question is, this defense, would we rely solely, it's important, solely on AI or just have a mix? I think that trusting quote unquote air quote AI is the only road right now, because speed, as you mentioned, is of essence, and I think we won't be able to avoid that, even if I'm uneasy with that as well. I hope I.
think there's a question.
Yes.
Just to intervene on what you said, because I happened to carry out a study on this point 1 year ago, and actually AI is the only road, except AI is also the only road of those who attack. And they also use and study the way you use AI to defend yourself. So it's a sort of a tricky game between professional and super organized attackers who are good at using AI to attack people who are good at defending with AI. So it's a very uncertain battlefield, and I would just raise this issue. Otherwise, we would think that, okay, let's trust and we sort of delegate to AI the concern of taking care of our cybersecurity, but that's not that simple.
Agreed. Totally agree. Last remark, I totally agree, because if someone attacks you using, for example, artificial intelligence, especially if they use large resources for computer from the hardware aspect, it's even more difficult to defend without using them.
Yeah, from my side, I don't think I have very solid and very insightful opinions, but I think I wouldn't fully trust AI in many cases. So to that, I preserve my doubts, I think.
I'm not sure I'm the expert to answer all the layers of your question, but I can share my experience in terms of the level of autonomous operations would benefit or not someone. For our case, flying autonomous drones, the technology is here. We know it. Now that I'm in Zurich, I could have drones flying, let's use the example of Nairobi, collecting the data, sending the data, doing the analysis, etc. However, by the laws, also in most countries in the world, I'm obliged to have at least one person for each job, right? So as a business, that for me is a great expense. However, because drones operations are still part of the aviation industry, where safety is first, safety comes first, I'm happy to walk at this pace. I don't need to run yet. As a business, that would make me have more income, more profit, right? But I don't think that should be the only, let's say, motivation to go forward. I'm happy to walk and enjoy the view.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions or points? Now it's the time. Actually, no, it's not the time. We are like 10 minutes after the schedule. So I would suggest to go like this. At first, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For participating, for coming here, for your opinions, for answering to the questions. Point two, we understand that we are not really sure about trusting AI. I would say that we fully trust it as it is part of our project. Third point is that next project will have to do with drones, because you have been the most famous. I mean, drones, all the questions were around the drones, so we have to keep that in mind. Fourth point would be that let's keep this discussion open, meaning we will bring you all together. We will keep this community active also via the project website, as well as we can connect you with the other panelists from the previous sessions that we have, so that we can somehow continue to exchange knowledge. And last point would be to give the floor, screen, and mic back to my dear colleagues in order to wrap up the whole dissemination event, which is actually you, Alessia.
Thank you. I think I will just stand here. So I think we've covered a lot this afternoon. I really appreciate it, and I think we all did the keynote speakers and also the panelists. You brought your own experience here with us today, and you tackled the arguments and the themes from your own point of view and from your own experience. So I think that made an actual difference, because we got a lot of point of view. So we have a lot to bring home today, right? And what else? I think technology gives us a lot every day because we can do a lot with the AI in general, but it also, I think, we also like technology also brings along a lot of challenges, and even if we have a lot of answers to the questions that we went through today, I think there are a lot of questions to still be answered, right? So yeah, I think that's it.
And the actual host here, if you want to say anything in order to close the event.
After all these speeches, I don't think I can say much. Thanks a lot to everybody for coming, and hopefully enjoy the rest of the event.
Great. Anyone?